So, let me start by thanking the organizers of this event for having me, and it's a great pleasure to be here in Freiburg, a beautiful city, a European city, European audience, a great sunny day. What could you wish more? Right? So, it's a great honor to kick off this conference with a presentation where I'd like to contribute my insights to the Brexit as the dark cloud over any conference that deals with European law these days, right? It's all the B word, the inevitable B word that stands in the room. And I will do this with my particular emphasis is the European financial market, which is one of the particular things, as you can imagine, of Brexit, how it's going to impact on that. And I would like to, kickstart by a disclaimer that this is a personal view. This is an optimistic view, as you will see in a moment, right? Criticism is very welcome. More pessimistic views are very welcome, right? You're very much encouraged to join in. If you have questions along the way, then please don't hesitate to ask. I guess that also we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers, so we take it as we go. All right, so the starting point is, as you all know, that we had this, this inevitable event last June, where the referendum in the UK voted against membership of the European Union, and the initial reaction was very much, let's reverse this, right? We didn't really mean it, so lots of regret. Brexit very soon turned into regret, but that is not happening, right? So I think it's the past months have very much shown that the UK government is very much committed to pull through and implement Brexit. What shape is the big question, right? So Brexit will come, but what will come instead? That is the big question mark at the beginning, and this is where we stand at now. Brexit will be Brexit, as Prime Minister Theresa May has famously said, but what is going to come instead? That is where we look a little bit into the crystal ball right now. Different scenarios are on the table in terms of future attachment of the United Kingdom to the EU. The Norway model, like something like an EEA membership, so Norway is part of the European Economic Area, but not of the EU. I'll speak about that in a moment. Then the Swiss model, very nice to talk about that here, very close to the Swiss border, where Switzerland really, as you all know, is not part of the EU, it's not part of the EEA, but has a special status thanks to bilateral, a ton of bilateral agreements with the European Union. That's really looking like a jungle at times. You can also say, the future relationship will be something much more akin to New York or Singapore, meaning that, we're completely armed. We trade maybe on the basis of WTO terms and nothing more. We might still be, we now, meaning the UK, we might still be important as negotiating and trade partner, finance partner, but from a legal perspective, completely armed. There's no special relationship anymore. That might also be in the cards, right, depending on how the negotiations play out. So you've probably read about and heard about these terms of a hard Brexit versus a soft Brexit, although I've recently been told that the government doesn't like the term hard Brexit. They prefer something like clean Brexit or something like that, because it sounds nicer than a hard Brexit. So hard versus soft is exactly the question where we stand right now. So a soft one would be phasing out of the EU membership, however, supplementing it, substituting it with something different, which would soften the exit. Right? So if you can imagine an agreement between the UK and the future EU, which will continue, for example, detachment in key areas of European legislation, and the Brexit will be a sort of very soft one, a soft landing. However, if there is a hard one, right, that means exit from one day to the next. Actually, some of the extreme Tory members have said, what are we waiting for? Right? We should exit from one day to the next, and then let's see what happens. So, that would be the hard one, and that would end all. That would be a legal nightmare. well, depending on whether you're practicing or academic, I think for the practitioner there would be great opportunities to advise and to think about all the problems that would ensue. But I think it's nothing that anyone seriously really wish for. In any case, for the topic of its consideration here today, the financial market is the big thing that the BRICS are interested in, right? And this is one of the key areas. Should we leave me? As we've heard, I'm frequently in the UK. I'm teaching in lots of research projects and talking to people that the finance sector is the one thing they like about Europe. And why is that? Simply because the single market is incredibly helpful for any industry, basically, selling your products, your financial products in this case, across the continent. Without any additional obstacles, we know about the single market and the four freedoms and the obstacles and all of this. So this is, where the finance sector incredibly profits. So whatever scenario you imagine for the future, this dream position of the City of London as the big financial hub of Europe and of the world is under threat, right? And so this is what we're going to explore today. As I've announced, my position is a rather optimistic one. It's a rather provocative one at times, and I've presented a similar thing to this actually in the UK, and people have told me you're far too optimistic. Right? So we'll see what we get. I've told them that we will speak again in 2 years' time after the negotiations have concluded. So the point, the main argument I will develop today is that Brexit will happen, but the effect for the financial sector will be minimal, right? Will be rather small. And why is that? Because there is a very, very strong case for continued access to the single market. And there are three reasons, if you like, that push for that. I will look at the economic case, I will look at political forces, and because this is a legal conference, I'll speak about the law, right, and the legal side of the future framework of European integration this week. So the legal framework, believe it or not, has been the least of the problems. The legal framework in Europe has been extremely accommodating over the past. Whenever there have been special wishes in European integration, special positions, loopholes, exceptions, then Europe has made it possible. And I predict that this will happen in the same way with Brexit. And the broader point then of my thoughts here are going to be that it is frequent in the European integration history that we see a situation where politics or economics, well, I hesitate to use the word wrong, but prevail maybe over the law, right? So there are very strong political forces that push into some direction, or economic rationales mean that everyone wants to have a certain result, and then the law is extremely flexible and accommodating in order to achieve the desired result. Let's start with some basic considerations. Right? What is the risk? What is the main threat that we are going to face? Well, end of the single market, as I've just said, exit of the United Kingdom from the single market, which is the biggest economic risk. And it's mainly culminating in the famous passporting rights. So these are, if you like, passport holders are you and me, right? But banks also are somehow passport holders. They enjoy the European passport, meaning they are allowed to distribute, sell their financial products across all 28, still 28 European member states without any additional checks, controls, or additional legal hurdles. So once you have an authorization in your home country, then you are allowed to sell cross-border, and that is the principle of mutual recognition that we know from many areas of European law, and it's been most famously developed in free movement of goods, right? Any law student knows about that. You can imagine it's much easier to do that with goods, right? Selling tomatoes across borders is relatively much more easy than selling complex financial products. So it took much longer to get to this principle here, but it's now deeply enshrined also in a lot of European secondary legislation. I've listed some of the legal instruments here, which we don't need to go into detail here. But basically, the message is, once authorized in one member state, you are allowed to market, distribute, sell all legal financial products everywhere without any additional obstacles. And that is great. Why is that great? Because it's a system of mutual trust, but it dramatically reduces costs. Right? So you don't. If you have one hub in Europe, then you can get to the entire market. You don't need to, as formerly being a bank, you need to set up a subsidiary or a branch or a place of business somewhere else, and go through a different set of regulations there, being authorized by the German financial supervisor, being authorized by the French supervisor, and all of them have different requirements and capital requirements and identity checks, and you know what. So this system is the genius of European law, and it dramatically reduces the cost for financial services across the continent. Now, what if that ceases? What is the alternative? I've already flagged up Norway as a possibility, and this was discussed during the referendum campaign. Norway is not part of the EU, but of the EEA, the European Economic Area. That is, however, very unpopular in the UK. Why is that? Because it would allow continued single market membership. Right? So that's the great benefit of being in the EEA, and it would allow sort of the safe of face. So the government could say, right, we promise that we exit from the EU, right? We go into the EEA instead. That would be the easiest way of doing it, because it would promise what they've done, right? It would fulfill the promise of the referendum, but at the same time they would still be in the single market. However, has a number of disadvantages. One of them is actually you need to implement quite a lot of European legislation that is shaping the single market without being at the table where things are developed and proposed. Is there anyone from Norway here? No. Right, so no one can report or tell us how it really is. Iceland? I think Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein? So it works as really they are part of the single market. They opt out from many other areas of the EU framework. They're starting from the single market, that's great about it, but they're basically recipient. Right? So Norwegian people tell you they actually hate it because they have to simply implement every single directive that concerns the single market into the domestic law. But they didn't get to vote or say or discuss anything about it, right? It's been decided in Brussels and they need to implement it. Now, Norway is comparatively small in comparison to the UK. Imagine, the UK having to adopt all those directives concerning banks and financial services and all of those without having a say on it. It wouldn't work, right? It wouldn't work at all. It would not be politically feasible. It would not be political. It would be political suicide, I think, for any UK government trying to go down this route. Plus, the interesting point is that Norway itself said, actually, we don't really want the UK in our club, right? So they advised the UK to stay out. So the Norwegian Prime Minister on the day after the referendum said, "Don't do it. You will hate it." And they have a good reasons also, because in the small EEA group there is a very delicate power balance as well of more smaller countries, and having the UK coming in as a big powerful guy would shake up the entire balance in that group. So I think the Norway's option is entirely off the table. It was considered helpful at the beginning, but it's not seriously discussed now. Now, what about the special meeting, right? What about a tailor-made arrangement? That would be a Swiss-style solution. There is, however, big divergence in standpoints of how we should get there, what the substance should be. The UK has pretty much ruled out that sort of thing from the beginning. They've made clear one thing they really hate is the free movement of persons. Drowning in a big political emotion debate about the refugee crisis, right? All of these things were mixed together. Immigration from non-EU countries, refugees, asylum debate, free movement of persons intra-EU, all of this was mixed together, right? As sort of, no, we don't want any foreigners to come in. So this was a big part of the referendum debate and a big reason for why there was a majority for exiting the European Union. And so pulling the plug on free movement of persons is one of the biggest things they've said. The EU has said, if you don't accept all freedoms together, all four freedoms together as a package, then we cannot grant you access to the single market. Right? They will either come together or none of them. So there is, it looks rather gloomy right now whether there will be some agreement on the single market today. Right? So the gloomy outlook there is that it looks quite difficult to come to an agreement. It looks quite difficult, if not possible, if you believe the current rhetoric, and that might signal the end of these precious passports that British banks like so much. You can imagine, of course, that they are heavily lobbying the UK government to push for something of a deal, but at the moment the climate doesn't really look like it. Now, against that gloomy outlook, I want to offer some more optimistic views. And as I've said, I start with the economics. So there is a very strong economic rationale for some sort of, I say this in a neutral way, some sort of continuation of single market membership for financial services. And why is that? We all know how heavily the UK is dependent on financial services. They are the UK's biggest industry. They make up about 10% of the GDP. Right? Imagine when this gets a dent, how much that impacts on the entire society and on the election prospects of any British politician who dares to make arrangements that are not popular with the financial services sector. Then look at the numbers of passports. Right? So there was a recent inquiry of how many guys actually do use these financial services passports. And the answer came from the Financial Conduct Authority, the market regulator in the United Kingdom, that it is about 5,500 UK firms that use the passporting mechanism to go to Europe. That really surpassed any expectations. And of course, it's not just UK firms, but it's also foreign, third country firms. American banks, imagine American banks wanting to conquer the European market. They, until now, only need a one-stop shop. They set up a subsidiary in London, and from there they can distribute all their products across Europe, or Japanese, or Chinese, or you name it. Right? So London is extremely popular because of this arrangement, right? Because of this arrangement, because it's not just serving the British market, but because it's a gateway to the entire continent, and that will dramatically change if the passporting regime is no longer possible. Another point is the so-called clearing of euro-denominated securities. Then it gets rather technical. This is part of the financial services market, which sounds rather technical and boring, but believe me, it's a huge business. Right? So clearing of euro-denominated securities is carried out to a large extent, no one really knows this, in the city of London, even though these securities are denominated in euro. And the European Central Bank has already tried to repatriate this into the Eurozone. They said, I think 2-3 years ago, we must start an initiative to get this business into the Eurozone because it's very hard to understand why clearing of these securities is done in London and not in the Eurozone. It should be in the territory of the currency. And the UK protest against this, again, because it's a huge business, billions of pounds work, and they went to the European Court of Justice, and the UK won. Right, so the UK won, and it was held this is a discrimination within the European Union, that it has to be within the Eurozone. Now, of course, if they exit the EU altogether, then the entire thing will break together like a house of cards, and it will not be hard to argue that now, at least, at the latest, the entire business needs to come back into the Eurozone, so it's extremely likely that the City of London will lose that business. And then, of course, you have all those speculations and studies, estimations of how the impact is going to be. Yeah? And you can Google this, what is the impact going to be of Brexit for the financial market, depending on your political views, depending on, of course, your lobbying interests, the figures will be different. I give you different estimates here, from small to big, right? There's a study, I was too excited here. There is a study by the consultancy firm Oliver Wyman estimating that it could cost something like 35,000 jobs. And the UK Treasury before the referendum, notice, estimated that it could be something up to 285,000 jobs at risk. Right? So I leave it to you to judge which of them you find more convincing, maybe something in the middle. But by all means, all those estimates are extremely high. So there is a real impact to be expected if they cannot be in the single market any longer, and they expect many firms to relocate to the West EU, if you like. Many financial services firms might relocate, have already announced that. And when the banks leave, it's not just the banks, right? But there is a lot of follow-up business that comes with it. Right? It's not just the banks, but lots of additional services, crawling around as financial services like moths around the light, right? That lawyers are one of the groups, right? That like to be there where the business is. And imagine all those law firms in the City of London. How attractive is that going to be if the financial services move, well, not entirely, but a significant chunk of them will move to the continent. That is, something we cannot really quantify yet, but it's also going to be a huge impact. And of course, third country banks, those who do not really have a strong affiliation or emotion to stay in the UK, will be the first movers. And the American banks, unsurprisingly, have already said that they've made big contingency plans and they're going to start implementing them very soon. Now, this is all the perspective seen from the UK. Let's go one step further and look at the mirror perspective seen from the EU, the EU 27, right? And there you will see that there's extremely similar urgency, need essentially, to have the UK as part of the single market. And that study that I mentioned before, where they counted the number of passports for the first time, revealed that the number of European firms who use passporting to get into London is even higher. So that was what caught everybody by surprise, that it's about 8,000 firms from the continent that passport into the city of London. Look at Deutsche Bank, for example, which is one of the, has a huge operation, almost an independent, full global bank based in London. Right? They have a large operation there. But you cannot really call a branch anymore. It's like a huge business itself. Right? And if that is no longer possible or becomes much more expensive, then the entire business model is affected by these decisions. So the conclusion here is that passporting is a two-way street. Right? It does not just work to the advantage of the City of London, but it's also attractive for the European banks to have a foot in the door, right, and to have access to this great financial centre which everybody is envious for, obviously. What else? There are lots of common interests, lots of economic common interests. If the UK leaves and the GDP shrinks, which is expected, then that will of course have repercussions on our economic situation in continental Europe too. Estimations again vary, and I don't want to bore you with figures or details here, but you can understand that this is also a serious concern, not just for the Brits, but the Fates have been alive for such a long time that losing these ties would also be economically very disadvantageous for the continent. One final point, there is a threat of arbitrage, right, a threat of competition. What does that mean? If the UK is serious and pulls through with a hard Brexit, says, we're going to play the New York model or the Singapore model, completely free from, as they say, from the shackles of European legislation and regulation, and all this nasty stuff in Brussels is going away. Then, some hardliners in the UK argue, right, we might have a competitive advantage because we could offer much more attractive regulation, a much more attractive business environment where all these onerous requirements from Brussels do not have to be fulfilled. Now, we can be much more accommodating to business, even more accommodating than we are already. So the threat lies here that the City of London could become even more attractive as a consequence of Brussels and say, you know what, we don't really care about the EU, we have sufficient business here, we have partnerships with the rest of the world, come to the City of London where you have even lighter regulation in your home, and your profits will increase. That is sort of a hardcore consequence, which is of course an uneasy prospect for any EU financial regulator. Now, that was the economic perspective. What about the politics? Politicians respond not just to economic pressures, but to this political game, right, which is somewhere ranking behind. Now, the first point to remember is, of course, that this was an extremely narrow majority. Everyone who's now an excited Brexiteer easily forgets or wants to forget that only 52% of the British population voted in favour, but there are these famous 48% who are surprisingly silent right now, but they are still there, right? And local constituencies in those constituencies where they voted in favour of Remain are becoming much more engaged right now. Second point, there was something that we might call a parliamentary rebellion over the past months, although it has now a little bit collapsed. What happened, the parliament was extremely upset with the government's course, and the parliament was extremely unhappy to not have a say in all this. Right? So this was all in the hands of the government, and these conflicts, I'm sure from your own home countries, most countries then do have a constitution which says, this is the domain of the government, this is the domain of the parliament. Unfortunately, the UK does not really have a constitution. It's not a written one. It's all these wonderful conventions, right? And there's no one who asks you the question of what's the government entitled to do, what's the parliament entitled to do. The government simply did, right? They simply did, and they simply advanced in their activities as they went along. So many MPs then came along and said, we want to have a vote. We want to have a vote before you hand in this famous notice according to Article 50 of the Treaty of the European Union, which is the official notification to Brussels that we want to leave, triggering the 2-year period of negotiation. And that went up to the UK Supreme Court. Businesswoman Gina Miller was behind this, but many others as well, started a court case challenging the government's action, saying we should be in the Parliament. And they won, right? So they won. The UK Supreme Court said, you're absolutely right, this is something that the Parliament needs to agree with. And they did, right? So the Parliament then in the end was very surprised to have that power suddenly, didn't really use it in the end. So they agreed with submitting the Article 50 notice, but there was a growing tension between the Parliament and the government, and this delayed delayed the entire process and also forced Theresa May to make a number of concessions in substance. Third point, the special arrangement within the UK, the federal structure within the UK, and in particular the different plans of some parts of the UK, in particular Scotland. Right? So you might know that Scotland is majority pro-EU, and I think over 60% voted for Remain in the referendum. So the Scottish government has taken this as an opportunity to renew plans for separation, for independence. They also submitted their pleas to all of these court cases that were pending and are pending. So taking an extremely active deal here, and would prefer, at least the government would prefer to separate from the UK and become an independent member of the European Union. How that is possible throws up a number of interesting legal questions, which I'm sure many can discuss here. A question of international law, essentially, right? Do they automatically a member of the European Union, or they have to reapply? All the questions are in the cards. But at least there's a political pressure from the north of the UK that their considerations need to be taken into account. And Theresa May, if she wants to keep the UK together, needs to make a number of concessions to Scotland in order to keep them on board. I think the prospect of Scottish independence is not extremely good. Right? They lost their referendum, as you know, a couple of years ago, and since then something else happened. The oil price dropped dramatically, right, making any prospect of Scottish independence even less attractive than it used to be. So I'm not extremely convinced that this is a compelling trend here, but at least they're putting out some pressure, similar to the Westminster Parliament, local parliaments do that as well. And then the final point, the most recent development was, as you will know, that the Prime Minister called general election for next month. Right? Why did she do this? A couple of reasons. I think she can be quite certain to get a large majority right now. The opposition is extremely weak, and that will give her time to breathe. That will confirm her current trends, and of course will give her leeway in negotiations, and also it will give her time 5 years from now, essentially, until the next elections come up. I think the calculation is the following. If inevitably the economy is going to shrink over the next years, then she will have some time and hopes for recovery until the next elections will then be in 2022, right, so 5 years from now. So she will have some time to recover and hope to win then the next election. That's the calculation behind it. The good thing about it is that if she gets a large majority, then Theresa May will be less dependent on the Tory extremists. Right? So there are some, the famous backbenchers in the Tory party who are extremely aggressive and want to exit the EU rather sooner than later. These few guys that say we should leave them now, right now, meaning now. So she doesn't need to accommodate their wishes anymore if she has a large majority. Right? If she commands over 60% in Parliament, then she can form alliances with more moderate Tories. So I think, from a European perspective, these elections, if they will end in the way that we expect and she expects, then they will be good news. And then these famous Article 50 negotiations. The problem is, right now, we are not seeing a trend towards, more friendly approaches, more, we understand each other, right? We will be sensible politicians, we will come to an agreement. I think unfortunately, the opposite is true right now. When you read the press, every day there is something new, some new suspicions, new bills that are presented of how high is going to be the exit bill for the United Kingdom. Confrontation on all levels, so it doesn't really look amicable at the moment. However, I'm deeply convinced that this is what we might call pre-bargaining rhetoric, right, and pre-election rhetoric as well. So wait for the elections in the UK in June, wait for the elections in Germany in September, and after that the negotiations will start in earnest, right, when no big elections are in the way anymore. There will be a short time window. Right? So the notice of leaving was submitted already in March. Since then, nothing big has happened, really, so the time is running, right? And you know how it works. They have 2 years' time to come to an agreement. And if there isn't an agreement by the end of 2 years, then the UK will be out without any soft deal, right? Then it will inevitably be a hard Brexit without anyone being able to stop that. So the problem here is Theresa May is under pressure domestically. She needs to be tough. She needs to fulfill the referendum outcome. However, the tougher she is, this sort of means even more resistance on the EU level. Right? So there is a large confrontation here. I expect, however, this to become much milder, much more reconciliatory after these elections. And the negotiations will hopefully then show some common economic ground. And my third point is then the common argument that you hear from Europe: we shouldn't give in, right? We shouldn't be friendly to the UK. We shouldn't make a special deal because we do not want to set a precedent. Right? We don't want to invite copycats. We don't want to invite other countries to do the same. That is a common thing that we hear in Brussels these days. We shouldn't shouldn't treat the UK in any special way, because then all other countries will queue up. The next thing will be French exits. French exits maybe become less likely now, but who else is in the pipeline? I don't know. Italy, Greece, and all those countries that have been queuing up for some time might be tempted to ask for the same. And we also are happy with part of the EU, right? We also exit and then ask for a special deal. That is a common thing that you hear. I don't think that is a convincing argument. Why not? Simply because the UK is unprecedentedly powerful, at least in the financial market. There's no other area in the legal arena where one country is so dominant over the others. And secondly, because we've been there before. I don't know if anyone in this room remembers, but there was a situation in the 1980s where Margaret Thatcher, then Prime Minister, was a very tough negotiator, everybody knows, right? And she had this famous sentence of, "I want my money back." What does that mean? I want back the money that I pay in these annual contributions to the EU budget. She threatened to exit, same thing. She then managed to be convinced by a special deal, right, guaranteeing the UK a special position, paying a substantial discount over all other EU countries. And when you look at reports, discussions, policy papers from that time, the same debate all over again. Right? The same things were uttered at the time. Oh, if we are now giving in to the UK and making them a special deal, all other countries will ask for a discount too. Nothing happened, right? No one else dared. It's true that some other countries got somehow special exceptions, but it didn't really throw the entire European project into jeopardy, as many at the time suggested. And also, if we think about it, I'll come to that in a moment as well, but the EU is already a club of so many special status and exceptions and exemptions. Right? Just think about EU versus Eurozone. Right? I mean, not everybody, as you know, is part of the Euro, for good reasons, maybe. Right? Not everybody is part of the Schengen area. Some countries opt out from this part of the European Treaty. Some have a special protocol on that. Right? Some have an exception here and there. Right? So this bargaining process over time has been there before. Right? It hasn't meant the end of the European Union, simply because we manage to speak to each other as grown-ups. Right? We are sometimes giving in because it makes economic sense. We want the UK to be on board, if that's the premise here, and then we might jump over our shadow and give them a special situation. So I think it's not going to be the end of the EU, as some predict. Now, this is how the whole complex web of contracts looks like, right? So you have Eurozone here, European Union, Schengen area, even different set of countries. Even Switzerland is, by the way, part of the Schengen area. So it is really, this is the European Economic Area that I mentioned earlier, right? With these three special guys here. Then we have the EU Customs Union, which even our Turkish friends are members. So you really have a different, complicated web already, and it's not impossible to fit this in, to fit the UK in a special single market arena. Now, the final perspective I want to contribute is then the legal perspective. Right? And so far, we've been speaking about the economic pressure to stay in the single market. I've looked at the political background, the debates that are running in the UK and in the EU. And the third area is then the law. And this is picking up something I've said earlier. It is surprising how malleable, how flexible a lot of the European legal framework is. And you are going to explore in these next days a lot of these aspects of EU law, of international law. International is even more extreme, right? Because the enforcement is always the problem. And now in the EU it is surprisingly similar. We are a club of goodwill, after all. Like, you have no way of playing tough. Yes, you have European Court of Justice. You can take other countries to court, and the European Court of Justice might impose a fine on certain countries. But what if a country refuses to pay that fine? Well, you go to the court again. You might even ask in the Stream case for removing voting rights and all that. But you do not have a powerful enforcement mechanism at the end of the day. It is a political club. It depends ultimately on the goodwill of the member states. That's what we've seen again and again. Now, in crisis times, in an emergent situation, in an economic crisis, this is even more compelling. And the Economist, famous British economic journal, has termed it in a way, given a choice between financial stability and the ruble, ditch the ruble. So this was one of the key lessons of the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, which sort of morphed into this famous sovereign debt crisis, which we've seen over the following years. Then we've seen during this time an amazing number of legal principles, legal rules completely set aside. Simply because in the eye of the storm, you don't ask for the legal rules. This is what I said earlier, where we frequently see that economic pressure is much more important than legal principle. And in the same way, I think Brexit can be understood as a threat to the coherence of the single market, in particular for financial services, as I've tried to explain. Right? And if the economic case is so strong, then we will find a solution. That is the single message here. Give you a couple of examples. European integration has been full of examples of this creativity. If you think about it, already these famous convergence criteria for being part of the euro are a good example of that. Right? You know that you have a certain level of debt that you can accumulate every year, right? New debt that you can take up. And you know that a number of countries violate this every year, again and again, right? And Germany also is part of it. Even though Germany very much insisted on having these tough convergence criteria in the Maastricht Treaty, Germany also violated this occasionally. And yet, for political reasons, the European institutions then always say, this wasn't nice of you, right? But we don't really trigger any harsh consequences. Now, in crisis times, we have even more of that, right? We have a lot of legal principles thrown completely overboard when we looked at the sovereign debt crisis. Hard to remember now, but a couple of years ago, we were almost at the end, right? 2012 was the height of the European debt crisis. Everyone was talking about the collapse of the European Union. Greece was somehow saved miraculously. The European Stability Mechanism, a big bailout fund, was set up. Many people say completely illegal, right? Because there is a violation. There is a principle in the European treaties which prohibits bailouts between different countries. So this was all brushed aside and created a miraculously creative European Stability Mechanism outside of the European treaties, right? So it's a separate organization which is created along the European framework as well. The banking union was another example. Right? The banking union is this institution which supervises banks now at the European level and also has the power to take them down if they are in crisis. Also in the hand of a central regulator, not anymore at the national level. The goal was to disentangle the uneasy relationship between national banks, national governments, the cozy relationship that was a big part of the contribution to the European financial crisis. This is something that was unimaginable 10 years ago, right? And yet, with a lot of legal creativity, it was possible to pull this project through. Then, what about the ECB, the European Central Bank? You know that Mario Draghi has been an extremely active savior, you can really use this word, savior of the European continent by his activities. He was extremely heavily criticized, in particular by the German government. So Wolfgang Schäuble is one of his harshest critics, and they argue whatever he did, right, all the time was absolutely illegal. He rescued the European project with one simple sentence. In 2012, at the height of the crisis, he said, "We will do whatever it takes to rescue the European project." That was interpreted as the ECB is not really respecting tiny, petty, unimportant legal rules. They will step in. If the fire is there, you don't worry about, who is not incompetent to do this. Should I first ask for permission? Right? No, the fire is there. If we stand by and watch, then the entire continent will go up in flames. So we must put some water on the flames. And they took Draghi to court, and they lost. Right? So the European Court of Justice also said, we give an extremely large margin of discretion to the European Central Bank. Final example, this could be continued indefinitely, right? Final example, a recent one from last year, so-called bail-in rules, technical thing also from the banking. This is when banks are in crisis. Where do you allocate losses? Everyone wanted to avoid having the taxpayer on the hook again. No politician likes bailouts. So what they designed instead is bailing in. Whom do they bail in? Well, shareholders, bondholders, creditors, right? They all should have losses when the bank breaks together. Fantastic idea, sounds great in theory. The first test case came in Italy last year, and a couple of Italian banks were in crisis. The Italian government said, oh my God, if this is really serious, then we must allocate all those losses to private individuals, you and me, who have a deposit at a local bank, who hold bonds of local banks, right? And a disaster was looming. Why? Because this is politically extremely unpopular, of course. Politically toxic to say all those private investors, this old grandfather who has put all his life savings into bonds of this struggling bank, right? To be there completely with zero from one day to the next. So, for political reasons, the Italian government found extremely let's say, creative ways of bypassing the new regime. So that there was a new, big, powerful, elaborate legal regime which was designed over years to avoid the financial crisis again. And what do? At the first best test that comes along, they find ways to get around it. So this is the European reality. I'm saying this because the upshot really is, if everybody agrees that there is basically no legal problem, then there isn't one. And the majority of the European countries and policymakers have shown a remarkable flexibility in sticking or maybe not sticking to the European precedents. Now, where was I? You can add to this list the number of opt-outs and the multi-layer character of the EU that I've mentioned before. This is also a testimony of this. How does that work? Right. If you see a new European treaty, Maastricht, Amsterdam, Nice, Lisbon, all these nice cities in the past, the best deal is always when you say, I have to give this to a referendum in my country. Why? Because people are always going to reject it. I mean, the experience has been even in France and Netherlands, all of this, people have rejected new treaties. What do they do next? Well, they renegotiate. They renegotiate, give to this country a number of concessions, and then put it to another referendum. So this is how European politics works, and then eventually people are happy, satisfied that their politicians have really been fighting for them, for their particular interests, with a few symbolic concessions, of course, right, nice, and you get through. So this is how the reality works. The point here is again that the legal problem is not a problem if everybody agrees that it isn't. Should we worry? Is of course the big question. Should we worry that the law is so unimportant? Right? This is a big, almost philosophical question. Some legal philosophers discussing this. Some people say, actually, this is the genius of the law. Some argue that the law is always there, it's always reliable when we have good times. But in a crisis moment, an emergency situation, it must be flexible. It must be flexible because it cannot predict every single situation, as extreme as it might be. So, if you take that view, then what's happening over the past years here is extremely genius, is extremely as it should be. The sort of rule of law people, of course, take the extreme opposite view and say, no. If we do not have foreseeability, if we don't stick to our legal principles, then we cannot trust anybody. Again, I leave it to you to think about which box you want to belong to, which your political conviction is, which your legal conviction is, but there is a broad divergent discussion here looming. Now, returning to Brexit, what does it all mean for us? My upshot is, because of this wonderful creativity, because of this mixture of political and economic and legal dynamism on all fronts, the prediction is that they will find a way to make it happen. And they will make it happen since the beginning. They've already said it will pull through. But they will also find a way of making the economic case realized. Right? So they will find a way of pulling through Brexit in form, but whether the Brexit will also be in substance is up to negotiation. And I think that there is a very good expectation, a high hope, that they will at least in the financial sector, it's probably going to be a sector vote. They will continue in the single market. There's a strong affiliation, at least, to the single market. That will be desirable for both sides. Now, becoming a little bit more concrete, and I'm probably running a little bit out of time, but wanted to offer you a few scenarios how this could look like, how my predictions could look like in a real world. In the order of preference, the most likely outcome, the most desired outcome would be a special deal. Would be a special deal similar to something that we have already with Switzerland, where the UK is formally out, but single market access remains. Probably, as I said, sector by sector. One hint for this is, by the way, everybody knows this car maker Nissan, right? The Japanese big car maker. They recently had a secret meeting with the Westminster government, and came out of this meeting, and the press was of course all there and had learned about this meeting. So sorry, I have to say, Nissan is an extremely big plant in the UK, and they were worried about selling their cars to the rest of the continent. So they came out of this meeting, and the press was all there, and I had microphones to them and said, so what did you discuss? What did you get out of this? They said, it has to be confidential, right? So we can't say that. But they smiled. We got what we wanted. They got what we wanted, and everybody assumes, all the commentators in the big newspaper assumed, and they got a promise from the government that for the car industry, they will negotiate continuation of single market access. It cannot be understood differently. Otherwise, the Nissan, which is a big employer in the UK, would have pulled out. So, this is already an example of illustration that the UK government is under high pressure from all sides to get to something akin to this. The UK is very likely, in my expectation, to give in on its immigration point, right? And it's probably a way, the big question is how they're going to sell it to the local population. Whether this is going to be, we stay in all full freedoms, but we negotiate a number of exceptions, or you can also draft it and design it in a way we opt out from free movement of persons, but we give in on a number of small points. So we opt in for a few different sectors, for example. Right? So that's an arts and games. Just the psychology of how you present it to the population is the bigger question. As bespoke agreement with the UK and the EU is therefore a possible outcome. Think tanks, policymakers are already proposing how this could look like. People from Bruegel, a think tank in Brussels, is already proposing something termed a continental partnership, right? A special New Deal, new settlement. You can find very nice terms for this sort of thing between the UK and the EU. Now, if that, number one, does not work, right? If that scenario does not work, then there is a second best solution, and that is the so-called third country passport. Now, that is, again, for the experts in the room, using the principle of equivalence. How does that work? If you're not part of the single market, you can still get a so-called third country passport for a financial service provider from outside of the EU, if the European Commission deems that you are subject to equivalent regulatory standards. So, for example, the European Commission might at the moment say, there is an American bank that would like to get a third country passport. We make a thorough assessment of the US-American regulatory standards. Are they comparable? Do they offer similar protection to consumers, for example, as in the EU? Do they offer substantial stability concern? All of this. So they go through all those long lists, and then at the end they approve this and they grant equivalence, for example, in MiFID. And then this third country provider can act on that basis almost as if it is part of the EU. That would also be a possibility for the UK. Like the British banks also playing through this possibility. If they are really out, right, if there's no special deal, then they might have to fall back on that regime. Now, why is that a second best solution? Because it is patchy. This regime of equivalence does not cover the entire body of financial law. It only applies to a number of directives, not to everything, and it only covers typically wholesale financial services, so not retail. Retail meaning when banks sell directly to consumers like you and me. Wholesale would be something like similar to B2B, right? But the Brits say, the B2B is even the much more important one for us, right? So we don't worry. We are happy to stay in the B2B sector, and that would be fine. The problem is, however, in my view, that this would be less preferable simply for political risks. Right? So this decision of equivalence is entirely in the hands of the European Commission. And it is possible, I'm not saying that they do this, but it is a risk they use this powerful position to exploit this for political reasons. Right? For example, they might look at every single deviation that the UK does from the European framework. And after all, they want to be free from the European framework. Right? They want to be different. They want to reduce all those terrible Brussels regulation stuff. And if they do this, the first single step they take, the European Commission might take this as an opportunity to say, you are no longer equivalent. Right? Unfortunately, you cannot act on the basis of the passport. So the third country passport is not, at the moment at least, it's not a mutual one, but it's a unilateral decision from the European Commission. That makes it quite risky. It is, however, a possibility that there is an agreement that the end of the 2-year period is an agreement, stands an agreement between the UK and the EU to accept each other on this basis. So that would be a hybrid agreement, not an agreement on the single market, but an agreement on using equivalence and committing, for example, to guarantee equivalence for the next 10 years or something like that. So that's another possibility which is less extreme than the one we've seen before. I skip that and come to the third possible scenario. If number 1 and number 2 don't work, right? If there's no deal on single market, no deal on equivalence, then there is still a third possibility, and that is private solutions. Right? If the governments don't do it, then we need private actors to act. And can they do this? Yes, we can. Right? The bank's already saying, if you don't get to grips here, right, then we will be forced to act. And I think it is extremely likely that, in particular, the big banking groups will find ways of opening subsidiaries, for example, in Frankfurt or in Paris, and then channel through all their business officially through this channel, but it's still carried out to a large extent in the City of London. And there might even be an agreement that this practice is sort of tolerated, even though it's not physically traded on this place. Yeah? So that would be a private sector response to this problem, and it would, of course, be much easier for the big banking groups. For big local banking groups, it's a piece of cake, right? It's sort of peanuts, the famous peanuts, to open a subsidiary somewhere within the European bloc. This solution is, of course, extremely unattractive for the smaller players. The smaller players will be really severely hit by this because they really need to reroute their entire operations and respond to the situation. All right, let me conclude. Right, so the starting point was Brexit means Brexit. My point to it is yes, in a formal way, that is almost certain that it is extremely unlikely that anything else will happen. But there are strong, powerful considerations that think that in substance we will see something different than formal Brexit. Whether this will be an agreement on continued membership, whether this will be this equivalence story or a private sector solution remains to be seen. I've offered you a few scenarios, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in reality. But my point here is that the legal framework for this area has been so creative over years that Brexit will also be something that later on we will add to my list, right, of legal inventions to make it possible to stay somehow affiliated to the European single market. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing and happy to answer any questions.